All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Pedro González, and together with my colleagues Thomas Noll, Felix Pastor, Eduard Resina, Peter Graven from Bernstein Center in Berlin, and here, the Escola Superior de Música de Catalunya, we are happy to present to you this quantum automation of playful heterophonic processes that we also published in the ICMC this year. So the central question of our project is pretty simple and would be, can the evolving mathematics of a quantum system be used as raw material for composition? So the idea is to turn quantum wave functions into useful material for our or maybe your creative endeavors. For sound design, composition, and probably in the future, even if it's not yet implemented, multimedia projects. So some composers spend a lot of time crafting automation curves, right? Like envelopes, breakpoint functions, LFOs. And we think that quantum data can give us already some automation envelopes that embody coherence and complexity. And by sonifying specifically the volume, magnitude, and phase of a wave function, we could explore some new musical behaviors while still preserving a clear scientific link to the underlying quantum process. So we will say that the project that we are working on sits at the crossroad of auditory display, but also computer music composition. And these magnitude and phase curves pose two attractive qualities for us. They are coherent, so every parameter track is linked to the same hidden state. So the ensemble, like the movement of the voices, behaves like one organism. And also they are unfamiliar, so the shapes of these curves do not resemble data like stock prices or weather data. It's for us, it's like kind of unfamiliar, this type of data. And we think that this duality between structure and novelty is the perfect playground for artistic expression, or what do we say with this? So on this slide, picture the ensemble, so a group of instruments, as a configuration space. And each instrument, or each of the tracks, corresponds to a position, or observation point, a coordinates x, that is organized or evolves under the same wave function, the same Schrödinger equation. So we keep the system unobserved, and by staying in the theoretical realm of quantum theory, the idea is to take advantage of the full information of the wave function. So every point x, every observation point, receives a continuous trajectory, one for magnitude and one for phase, describing the wave function. And the result is a new type of heterophony, so multiple voices that are evolving and diverge locally, but still they remain somehow locked by an underlying quantum unity. So they are all kind of like moving in the same kind of vibe, or however you want to call it. Now we will listen to Thomas Noll and Peter Graven talking a little bit more about the math around this concept that we are using. So I don't know, Peter and Thomas, are you there?
Yeah. Hello. Can you hear me? Is it?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, good. Salutación dall'Alemania. Peter is in Hamburgo y yo in Torgau. So, and we have a collaboration on an earlier project where we took some inspiration for the present one. I mean, what is behind here is the simplest case, namely a one-dimensional wave function, which would in physics describe the movement of a single particle in one direction. But the particle is a wave, so and this is this idea of unity which we want to explore here. So one paradigmatic example is the quantum harmonic oscillator, and you see there are these little diagrams, wave functions. These are the eigenstates of a quantum harmonic oscillators in the upper row. They are the solutions of an eigenvalue equation. This is called the stationary Schrödinger equation. So they are the eigenstates of the Hamiltonian, of the energy operator. Below, you see similar graphs. They are a little more complicated. Peter and I have been working on Gaussian mixtures. So typically, you have in cognitive musicology, you have probability functions, and we interpret these as a probability density function of a wave function. So this is the lower example from our previous work. So these eigenstates are so far static, but as soon as we go to the dynamics, where these eigenstates have a quite simple behavior as standing waves. And they are the elementary solutions of the dynamic Schrödinger equation. Maybe musically they are not that interesting, but we use them as building stones for, if you go to the next slide, Pedro, as building stones for superpositions of these stationary, of these standing waves. So you see this summation there. On the right side, we have the time development, so these theta k are the eigenstates, and then we have some coefficients rk. So to construct these superpositions, one has either to choose these rk by hand or randomly, or one can calculate them from given initial states. And as an example, I show you here an idea. We can take the ground state, which is a standing wave, but if we shift it to the right here, we get a non-trivial, interesting time development. And this is to be seen in the video below. There you have three curves moving. This is a real part, imaginary part, and the absolute value. Or to be more precise, the square of the absolute value. That means the probability density function. So another way to look at precisely the same example is to use polar coordinates. Here we see this as a landscape. From left to right, you have the positions, so the configuration space. Time goes from front to back. And the landscape shows the heights are magnitudes and the color shows phase. In practical applications, we don't need the continuous model in its full expressity. So we can make finite choices, or, and that is the approach which we take in the MAX MSP implementation, to use a finite dimensional formulation of quantum theory in terms of finite dimensional matrices. Pedro, can you show the next slide? So suppose we need only 10 dimensions or 20 or 7 or whatever. We can use a Hamiltonian. This is then a Hermitian matrix with 7 times 7 or 20 times 20 dimensions. Here these matrices are here shown as also in color and height, so as phase. So the coefficients are shown as complex numbers here in these like organ-like figures. The components one can use now is the amount of kinetic and potential energy in the Hamiltonian. This is, so to say, a physical metaphor, like in the quantum harmonic oscillator. And then some perturbation, which can be motivated by some potential, as we did in the work with Peter, or it can be just edited by hand or randomly. With 5 dimensions, you see here precisely the numbers. You have a matrix, you have eigenvalues, and you have eigenvectors. And they are the starting point for the calculation of the time developments. Yeah, I think that's it so far.
Yeah, so what do we do with this? The pipeline that we follow has 2 parallel implementations. The first, the stage 1, is the continuous case that Thomas was explaining before, and we are computing it in Mathematica. It's a software for like physics calculations. And we pre-compute 4 Gaussian mixture scenarios at a high resolution of 20,000 time frames at 7 observation points, both coherent and deflected ground states, with what he just explained. And the idea is to give composers kind of like a family of already made curves that they can use to sonify in different ways or to link in different ways. But then, for the presentation today, we will focus on stage 2, which is stage 2, which is the Qt package. It's like a package inside MaxMSP in which the user can generate finite systems on the fly and output magnitude and phase. So the composer can set the dimensions of the system, the perturbation weight, and choose an initial state, a ground state, and then regenerate new streams in real time, of course, of magnitude and phase. And it can be done in real time, so really producing the different. Right, so this package, the Qt package is divided in 4 main modules following the process that Thomas was outlining. So the Hamiltonian editor, in which we, in this case for the quantum harmonic oscillator, we define a Hermitian matrix that represents the Hamiltonian of a particular oscillator. Then we have the eigenstate inspector that basically calculates the eigenvalues and the eigenvectors of this particular Hamiltonian. Then the initial state editor, in which we define the initial state. And then the time developer, which is like the module that actually produces the curves. So in order to do that, we have a set of externals objects. It's like a library for Max. At the moment, we have programmed 3 of these objects, but in the future, we will have more in the library. The ones that we have already developed are the ones that you can see underlined. So the quantum harmonic oscillator that generates the Hamiltonian, the eigenbasis calculator that will give us the eigenvectors, eigenvalues, and then the time evolution streamer, the time developer, with which we can have all the curves. So a little bit of each of those. This is the help file of each of these Max externals. So the Qt quantum harmonic oscillator builds the finite harmonic oscillator Hamiltonian, and the user can specify 2 arguments. The first number that you see there is the number of dimensions, and then the weight of the potential energy is the second argument. And when you send a bang, it will give you as an output an n by n Hermitian matrix ready for the processing for the next object in the chain. The next object is the eigen calculator that, as I was saying before, will take any Hermitian matrix and then will output the eigenvalues and the eigenvectors as 2 lists, separate lists. And then finally, as I was describing before, we have the Qt time developer that you get as an input the eigendata and the coefficients. Also, you can specify the time grid. So you will say the maximum and minimum time and the time steps in which you want to compute the curves. And then it will deliver 2 polybuffers, one for the magnitudes and one for the phases that you can already play around with. And this is the main set of externals that we have. And now Felix will show some abstractions on how to actually use these externals in MaxMSP for your compositions.
Okay, so this is the basic workflow that Pedro just explained with the 3 externals and what they produce, the inputs and the outputs. This first one is the one that produces the Hermitian. This one produces eigenvalues and eigenstates. And this one is the one that produces the time developer. To work with this, in the end, these are numbers, and as Pedro was saying, we don't know what their relationship is besides the tracing them back to the Hermitian. So this workflow is actually very important for the project, because once we get to just numbers, when we lose this connection, then doesn't make that much sense. So to be able to work with this, we started developing some classes, which are these abstractions that actually encapsulate the externals, that would allow us to think of these more as compositional material. So as this one does, it encapsulates the Hermitian matrix, and you can see that it is a Hermitian matrix with the real part and the imaginary part and the symmetry. From this, we generate the time development, which is the core, and then there's inside these boxes is what you have here. So, and then we still don't know how we will want to use this information or reuse it. The advantage of these is that they actually have names. So you could have several different time developments for one single Hermitian. Again, that connection between the generator with the time developments is very important. And here you can see, you can actually see the calls in here, but you can use these as separate things. You might need the time development in call form maybe. And this is actually just a display, but it is also a player. So this is the buffers. It's a poly buffer with 2 channels, and one channel is magnitude, the other is phase. And here you can see, for example, the 12, the ones generated here for a 12-dimension case. And these are all the different time developments. It's hard to see any patterns with just seeing or with the numbers. It's probably even more difficult. But this allows us to play them. So each of these players has outputs magnitude and phase in both float form and signal form, which are the main channels in Max. But even in this broad view, you can see that there's a certain symmetry to this. If you take a look at the central line here, this would be the middle point. So these are organized. In this case, I think this one goes from minus 0.5 to 0.5. So there's 12. There's the observation points have this time, and it has 1,000 points in each. And you can see that there's a certain symmetry. These have phases that essentially are one cycle here, and then here there's one cycle in a little bit more. And as you move away from the center, you get more and more phase activity, and you get a more subdued magnitude. So you could see that in one of the first pictures where you had the time developments and the phases in color. As you moved away from the center, you had a lot of colors, and as you moved, and very small magnitude. So this has become important in thinking of how we sonify these. So these are experiments. They are between the first experiments of things that are very literal sonifications of magnitude to pitch or things like that. So they're a little bit more musified in a way, but they make it more. They allow us to explore a little bit more what the compositional possibilities would be. In this case, I wanted to take advantage of the idea that they're all, you can take different time scales of this. So there's the, sometimes not the ambiguity, but there's the exchange sometimes between what is an X position and what is a time position. And so in this case, I'm using a buffer, a granular synthesizer too, and I'm mapping the phase to the position. So in a curve like this one down here, you would start at the middle of the buffer and go to in the middle then goes to the beginning and it goes to the end. And in the sonification that we'll show today, it's the same sample. It's a sample of a ricochet on a violin, and it's just a ricochet until it dies out. So you'll see that every time there's a clear beginning of the file is when we've had a phase change. And there's 3 different scales to see what happens or what the relationship between these is. So there's like 3 different, three very distinct parts in this one that you'll hear. And the first one is using just 4 of these waves, the ones in the center that have very little activity or less activity, these over here. And these tend to, oh, sorry, this is in the small one, in the large time scale. So it would be these 4 over here, which, as you can see, if you imagine this as being the position in a granular synthesizer in a buffer, this would be, for example, this curve or this one over here in numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would be a complete reading through the sample, but of course it goes back and forth. So there is a granular component to this, which makes it a little interesting sometimes. They are all spaced out in 12. And there's also movement on top to help them differentiate. It's not easy because the material is hard to grasp. There's even if these were simple pitch scales, having 12 of them at the same time would be already very difficult. But even like this, you can hear patterns that are there, and you'll hear first in the large scale, then in the middle scale, and then the small scale. Actually, the last of the 3 parts has all 3 scales, and they kind of phase out. So you start with the largest one, the one that has more activity, to the one that has less activity, and it's more sustained. Just as an experiment of seeing how they are. And even like that, you can hear that there are certain patterns, even between the different scales, that are similar. So what I mean by the scales is if we take just approximately this part over here, which would be more or less starting like that, and we make it larger, you can see that it is actually this portion, maybe here. You can see that it's actually this one down here, and the same thing here with the 010. So they're one inside the other. So I think we could hear it. I forgot to mention there's a fourth one where as the levels move, they also move behind so that you could hear the entrances better. So I think that's it for the...
Do you want to show? We have different examples of sonifications or ways of using the data. The one before was, like basically the phase to the buffer position of different playbacks with a granulator. And now another type of mapping would be taking the phase and relating it to the event density, so the amount of events per second in a particular observation point, and taking the magnitude and mapping it to pitch. So I will play back a couple of examples of this idea. One of them, also the observation point 0, the phase of the observation point 0 is also affecting the general tempo. And also there are two other differences in the sonification. So there is one in which is microtonal, so all the glissandos of each of the magnitudes, when the phase triggers an event, is not being scaled to like to kind of 12 tones, but is really using the microtones. And then we have another version in which is actually being mapped to the 12-tone scale. So let's maybe hear first the one that is being mapped and also that is kind of slow, and we are using 3 observation points with a gesture of kind of like a second, minor second down that is being repeated in the different voices. And there is no composition going on. It's all just straight sonification of the data. better to stop it. There is no form, it's actually just... Okay, another example would be, there are 4 observation points. They are mapped to, 6, and they are mapped to different, 2 instruments from one side and the other side of the system. One is a harp and the other one is a guitar. And it's much faster, and in this case, we have the microtones of the evolving magnitudes. So you will hear that it sounds a little bit more complex in a way. Let's see. You see that there are certain kind of patterns that appear. Each of the observation points only is giving us like a glissando, but depending on the phases, they are kind of like evolving, and the patterns create this. Well, the evolution of the phases create these different patterns that are evolving. And now the final one that we wanted to share is a full ensemble in which also the tempo, the general tempo, is being changed depending on I think it was the magnitude of the observation point 0. So sometimes it goes faster and sometimes it goes slower, but all of the voices are kind of like synchronized to. Maybe for I don't know, half an hour or something like that, like the render we have. So there is no time to stop specifically. It's just, right. So yeah, I think that were the examples and the main idea, and the future work. We want to make the Qt package beta version. Public to the composers and people working or interested in this tool by 2026, second quarter. Then, Thomas, are you around? Maybe not. Well, there is this idea of integrating it with Matt Sola theory of hypergestures that Thomas is more informed about. And then also we had the idea to have some kind of cross-media type of, or multimedia type of sonification, lightification, haptification, whatever. So kind of like having, for example, scores in which the players will receive different vibrations following certain patterns, and then they play from them, integrating video, different ideas around that.
Any questions? Yeah.
Did you try those curves as waveforms? Because it's like a standing wave, and maybe it's interesting to generate as a sound generator.
No, we haven't explicitly.
Espera, sí. Espera, a ver si veo.
No, we haven't. We haven't explicitly done that, but since the idea behind storing them in buffers with 2 channels was in that direction, but I don't think we've. Have you tried that, Pedro?
No.
Using it as a wave form? No, we haven't. But it's one of the possibilities. I suspect it'll be very noisy, but the phase 1. But yeah, it's.
I think also it's very beautiful to see how the relation between science and music, that I can imagine this is very complex for me, this theory, quantum, but like when you have the harmonic series, it's also physics, no? And that is something that musicians took from nature, let's say. So I think it's very interesting, this. And my question is also, well, it's more an observation that it sounded quite familiar, some examples. So yes, it lacks sometimes direction or some decision making, but it sounds quite good already. There was no question, sorry.
No, actually, you're right that there's some mystery at the beginning when you. I mean, we've done like 10 or 12 different sonifications. We haven't done the one with as reading it as a wave, and they all kind of there's something about it. Thomas did one with all these oscillators that are changing just the timbre and there's something about the texture that is not random, but you don't know what it is. So there's yeah, it's a mystery.
Thank you for the presentation. Maybe just a question about the 2 mapping that you used in microtonality and the other one. When you're not using the proper frequency and you are choosing to do a 12 scale, how are you choosing what will be in which note will be which note? Is it like depending on the eigenvalues, or how are you doing it? I'm not sure you said it.
Yeah, so basically Max is triggering the value of the frequency, and then we send it to Ableton, in this case, for this case that I show, and there is like a pitch wheel and plus the MIDI note. And basically for this, in this case, the only thing we do is we don't take the pitch wheel, so it's basically the closest from the 12 scale that is the one before. Like you take out the pitch wheel information, and we just run it directly. So it's very straightforward. There is a device in, I think it's called microtuner or something like this, that you can have different scales and morph. This is something also we want to do, we didn't do yet, so that the phase changes, morphs between different microtonal scales. So instead of having only the, the magnitude and taking the frequency, just playing with systems that already make sense. Because now I think the microtonal cases sound a little bit random in a way. Like, yeah, it sounds a little bit like, okay, but maybe there is something more that we can do. But yeah, it's just like MIDI notes. Yeah. Any math-related question? For
No, this is an interesting idea too. I mean, the flattening, no, and the time signature, no, is actually a circle, no. If you make enharmonic identification, so just interpret the phase as how many flats you use or sharps is an interesting thing. And you can do that for every voice separately. So it's a kind of polymodality, which is a nice experiment.
Okay. So, any other questions, or should we wrap it up? Thank you.
Okay, so which one is my research question is what potential do these formal analogies between quantum system and classical non-deterministic system can help us for generate acoustic phenomena. So my goal in this master was to develop some tools or some sound to work with using this quantum physics. Okay, so I'm going to start with the physical instrument, this prototype that I have here. The scientific motivation, it came based on these two studies. The classical and quantum parametric phenomena is a book from Alexander Eichler. And also this paper called Stochastic Guitar. That's why I ended up reading that paper for the name of the paper. So I contacted him, Eichler, this guy. So he explained me what are the study about. So they see theoretical and practical that if you represent the dynamic of a classical oscillator with thermal fluctuation or a stochastic form, you get this dynamic of the system, this Gaussian form. And then if you also represent the quantum harmonic in the coherent state that is more stable, you get the same representation, mathematical representation. And also they did the practical experiment to see the result. This was a theory. So I have to say that this similarity is, I don't know where is something is in there. Well, this similarity is mathematical because one is quantum and the other one is classical. So, okay, so I have the opportunity to go to Zurich to collaborate with this with Alexander. That he showed me the first prototype of was experiment for them. The goal for them was only to see the behavior of the system. That's why they use the coil here, and they put also to excite the string more, and they use a piezoelectric to capture the dynamic of the system. But the goal was to educate a student, not the sound. So my thing that I was trying to do is to see to hear how this behavior sound in like a classical way. So my current setup that I have now is all the things that I have in the table. I have one computer sent it through Max MSP, the white noise, then goes to the audio interface, to the amplifier, and then through this coil that we developed, and then the coil moves the string, and the string is captured by the pickup that is here, and then go to an audio to my computer to work with Ableton or whatever. That can also go through a guitar amplifier or everything. Okay, so the first stage of my instrument fabrication was to work and develop to the coil, that is like the heart of the instrument, because it's the one that moves the string without touching it. So Felix helped me with to work with this mutant monkey. It's a lab here in Barcelona. They are really, really nice people. They work a lot with synthesizer and electroacoustic instrument. So they helped me to build this coil. It was an old guitar pickup that we like do it again. So, and then the other part was the fabrication of the prototype of the instrument. That here is the design that here Armando helped me. He's an architect, so it's easy for him. And also for the fabrication, I work with Salve Studio. It's a studio here in Barcelona. It's a design studio. So they helped me with this the fabrication of the instrument. Okay, so here is the picture of the prototype that I have now. It looks like a guitar because I use all the parts that I have from an old guitar, so that's why it's almost. But the important thing is to excite the string with a stochastic force and to capture the result in an amplifier. The good thing with this, and what I'm so excited with this, is because it's analog, so you can it's gonna change the sound of the instrument. If I change the shape of it's like somehow like a piano or like a guitar. So I'm really excited to have feedback and to improve it. So here are the result of only one string. If I excite one string like in a regular way, using a guitar pick, I have the fundamental and also have the different harmonics. That's the usual thing. And if I excite the one string with the stochastic excitation, I have not also the fundamental, but more rich and complex sound. So here I have a 4-string, and so when I play the instrument, it's gonna sound 4 different behavior of this. Okay, so after that, I developed a DSP model using a spectral modulation in real time. It's more or less similar that the data that Pedro and Felix use. I use, like I say, each one of the string, when I excite it with a stochastic force, is behave mathematically like a coherent state. So I took the time development of the wave function, the real part, to make a simulation of that in time, transform it into a matrix, and then each row of the matrix is represent a moment in time. So it's a big movement of the wave function. So I use this matrix or this wave function to filter each frame of audio that come into this DSP model. This is a DSP that you can use with different source of audio. It's not only with this instrument. So the result is a continuous spectral transformation of the sound that from this logic of quantum evolution. They are more or less the similar graph that Pedro and Felix showed. This one is the coherent state, the real part, and this one, when you have 2 coherent states, you got they call like a kitten state. It's a superposition. So now in my DSP model, you can choose between a spectral modulation with a coherent state and also a kitten state. So in order to share this this work with the different musicians to have different feedback, I developed this Mac for Light device that it can be used in Ableton. And I was really focused into give different controls in order to can change different controls while you were playing or producing music and everything. So my idea is to share this Mac for Light device to different musicians to have feedback. Okay, so first I'm gonna do a little bit of like a little demo of the instrument, of how it sounds alone, and then I'm gonna do the piece with the DSP model. That's an example of how the instrument sound. I use it like almost as a bass string in order to have more like metal to move the string. So, and also I have, as a prototype, I have a little bit of feedback, but if you're going to use this kind of speaker, is sounding like good. So, okay, so now I'm gonna present a piece working with the input, the real-time input of the instrument, and then the DSP model. Okay. I don't know if you have any questions. Okay.
So one of the words that you used to describe your guitar was tangible. And tangible means capable of being touched. But your hands were more on a MIDI controller and your gaze was on the computer. And I was wondering if you, like, on the future, you would like to explore more the tangibility of your instrument, like, I don't know, like putting there things so that it's more like a unit, or you are planning to continue using your computer setup?
Okay, it's on? Okay. So no, my I don't know if I didn't explain it well, but my goal was to not touch the string. I say that the analog part of the instrument is really nice for me because you can have more kind of sound. But my goal is to develop some kind of, for example, some kind of synthesizer that they use the electric current to generate the sine wave and everything. My goal is to have like somehow like a panel to manage and have this as an input of the instrument and work like as a synthesizer, like an input of a synthesizer, not like a touching, or it's like the source of the instrument for me now, but I'm open to different ideas.
Wow, amazing, thank you. I really liked it. And I was wondering also if it's possible to, at some point of the piece, or another piece, if you can stop the coil and drastically stop the vibration of the strings. And then start again, like for a compositional purpose.
Like okay. For this kind of setup that I have now, I need a time in order to move the string, and also the time to get the like an envelope to go like in zero. So in this kind, I can do it like going up and then down, but it's only with this coil, so I have to send the information. So it's not that easy to stop and
But you could, like with the hand, maybe stop the vibration?
Yeah. Maybe, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can do it in my home. I put the finger here in order to hear each one of the string. Yes, I do that, yeah.
Thank you. I was wondering, so you, your input is this white noise that is sent to all the chords?
All the notes, all the strings.
Yeah, all the strings. And I was wondering if you have a difference if you add the noise of two strings separately, and if you play them at the same time, is there some kind of interferences between them that happen, or are
if I apply the white noise only in two strings, you say?
Yeah, so if you apply the white noise to one string, then another one, and you sum the result,
Yeah.
would you have the same result as if you were applying the white noise directly to two
To
strings?
both at
Yeah,
the
yeah.
same time.
Have you tried that? or
No, because this setup is really like a prototype. But I would like the thing that I've been trying is to apply this like white noise in the background, and then start to modulate the with another sine wave. So it's started to excite different harmonics. So it started like to sing the instrument, but was not part of the research. So. But was part of the other question to develop something to somehow control the harmonic of the strings.
And also because now it's tuned as a guitar, or are the chords just...
No. Now I was like trying to find a way to have the sound, and also to be the more as like, I don't know, flat,
Okay.
to have the movement, you know. But it's not in a particular tuning or... No more questions? Okay, thank you.
So thank you everyone for being here. Can you hear me? Yeah. So I am Juliette Tudas. I am also doing the BIST master that Felipe talked about, which is a multidisciplinary master in research science. And I have two supervisors that are Maciek Lewenstein, our group leader at ICFO, and Reiko here, that is both working at ICFO and ESMUC. And I am also working with Antoine Reserbat-Planté, that I didn't put here, I forgot, but he helped me a lot with all the dipolar modeling that I will explain a bit later. And just a quick thing about ICFO, it's an Institute of Photonic Sciences, so we are basically doing quantum physics, and it's all kind of quantum physics, so chemistry, theory, and our group is the quantum optic theory. And so during the year, I was also working on the interface between quantum physics and sound, and more specifically music. And one of my projects was modeling sound reverberation with quantum-inspired features. So this is what I'm gonna present today, but we also worked on some sonification of some specific functions. But I can talk about that later if you want to ask me some question, but it was more about the reverberation for today. So first of all, just so that everyone is on the same page, I'm gonna take back some general principle of artificial reverberation. So reverberation is an acoustic phenomena that occurs when sound persists in an environment. So when you have a sound source, you will receive the direct sound, but if you're in this room, for example, the sound will also reflect on the boundaries of the room, and you will have some sound that will be received later, and that's what we call the reflection, and that is what is called reverberation. But I'm sure that you all already used reverb in some composition or in some work, so I think you're more or less used to this concept. But the particular thing that we are doing is that, so musicians use it because it's nice to be able to record the sound in a soundproof room and then add artificial reverberation to the sound to control it perfectly if we want something that sounds drier or wetter. And acousticians are really interesting in this phenomena because it's wave in a room and we want to know how it's working and we want to be able to reproduce it perfectly. And that's why we are modeling it. And this is what is called artificial reverberation. It's just that we are modeling it with everything that we know about waves. And for that we have several techniques that are used, and two of them are ray tracing and feedback delay networks, and that's the two techniques that I used during this year because it was easier to implement the quantum behavior in these models, but a lot of other models exist and can be used. So now that we talked about this reverberation part, about the quantum part of the project, in quantum physics we have a subfield that is called cavity quantum electrodynamics, and it studies how particles and waves behave in a cavity. So we thought that maybe we can make some parallel between the cavity quantum electrodynamics that study waves in a quantum cavity at the nanometer scale, and the reverberation that is also waves in a cavity. It's just that it's an acoustic cavity. And more specifically, we looked at dipolar interaction, that are interaction occurring between two dipoles. It's particles with a dipole moment. And they are well known to decay following power rules. So it was also another thing that made us think that it could be linked with reverberation, because we have this decay envelope. And we have several interaction models. I won't delve too much into details, but you can look at it if you're interested. But basically we're using 3 different models: the dipole-dipole one, Van der Waals one, and Casimir-Polder one. And depending on the regime and the model, it decays as 1 over the distance to the power of 3, 4, 6, or 7. So these are the different interaction models. And yeah, depending on which one you use, you will have a bigger or weaker interaction. And so basically, if your 2 dipoles are very close from each other, the interaction will be very big, and if they are far from each other, the interaction will be quite weak. So how we implement that in our models? First, I will talk about the ray tracing model. So basically, you put a sound source in your room, and then you launch some rays in it. The more the merrier, obviously, because it aims to represent how a sound source is launching the sound waves. And then you track everywhere they go, and you also put a microphone, a virtual microphone in your room, and every time that a ray is crossing the path of your microphone, you add a peak on your on your impulse response, and that gives you something that should look more or less like that if you're in a basic room. And so for that, the component that we are looking at is the reflectivity of the walls. And so on every bounce, you have your ray that is losing a bit of intensity. How we are doing it with the quantum features is that we are removing the reflectivity of the walls, and instead, if the path of the ray is short, then the gain will be bigger, and if it's very long, the interaction will be weaker, so that it looks like you have 2 dipoles at each boundary of your ray, and that the interaction depends on that. So for that, I picked a 5 out of 5 meter room in 2 dimensions, because then when you switch to 3 dimension for a room, it adds a lot of complexity. I put the sound source and the microphone in the center, and the sound source is launching rays omnidirectionally. It's 75,000 rays, and it can bounce up to 20 times. And we have this gain function that depends on the interaction model that we are using. And so it gives us something like that. So the A panel is for 1 over the distance to the power of 3, to the power of 4 for B, power of 6 for C, and power of 7 for D, yes. And so you can see that even though they quite look like a generic impulse response, so we were maybe expecting weirder behavior, but you can see. We can actually see that there is quite of a rebound at some point, and we think that maybe with other configuration in our room, we can get weirder impulse response with maybe a reverb that come back more or less. But the thing that we can see is that for bigger gain, so 1 over the distance to the power of 3, we have something more dense and with more reflection. So that's what we were expecting to get. And I will make you hear it. So once you have these impulse responses, you can do a convolution with recorded audio, so a voice, an instrument, whatever you want. And when you do this convolution, you get, the output you get is the reverberated audio. And so in blue, it's our reverberated audio, and in black, the reference one. So you can see that most of the time the blue one is, so our output had a bigger amplitude, and sometimes we have some interferences in the whole process that give us some part where the reference one is a bit bigger. So we can maybe hear a bit. So this is my test audio. I recorded it on my phone, so it's not a perfect audio. It has a bit of noise, but it's quite okay.
We are testing the artificial reverb.
And then the 4 models.
We are testing the artificial reverb. We are testing the artificial reverb. We are testing the artificial reverb. We are testing the artificial reverb.
And just, it was this at the beginning.
We are testing the artificial reverb.
So we can hear that A and B are quite similar, and C and D quite similar as well. Maybe with other configuration would have bigger differences. Also, here the decay time is quite short, so that's why the reverberations sound more like in a small to medium room and not something a bit bigger. But this is it for this one, this model. And the second model that we have is the feedback delay network one. So this is a signal-based model where we give the feedback delay network our input, and the signal goes straight but also goes through a network, and in the end the output is the sum of your input signal but also the reflection of your signal. And we implemented it with our quantum behavior. How we implemented it with this quantum behavior is that we took a set of nodes that represent our particles, and we created the feedback network based on the architecture of our nodes. So here it's 3 nodes that were placed randomly, but you can think of more nodes and in a specific put in a specific manner. And usually it's exactly the same update equation. The only thing that is changing is that usually you don't have this gain function, so it's quite easy to implement. It's just this novelty. Everything else is the same, and for this we just use a feedback matrix that is a householder one, but you can use other feedback matrix. And it was used because at least you don't lose energy. And this gives us these impulse responses. Here it's only for 1 over the distance to the power of 3, 6, and 7, because the 4th one was too similar to the 1 over the distance to the power of 3. But you can see that we have quite different impulse responses. We took the impulse responses at only 1 node, but you actually have different impulse responses for each node and for each interaction model that you want, that you have and that you want to get. So here the first one is very, very short, and you can see that the other one are longer. And that's something we wouldn't expect at first, because the 1 over the distance to the power of 3 is supposed to give us a bigger gain. So it's quite strange that the feedback, the reverb is decaying so fast. But actually it's due to the topology of the network, because when you have a network with a bigger gain, when the signal is crossing the network with this bigger gain, actually it will decay faster because you will have more interaction due to the bigger gain. Whereas for the interaction model that is 1 over the distance to the power of 6 and 7, it stays more locally and it's confined to this region close to the node, and that's why you have this envelope that is decaying longer than the first one. And this gives us some convolution waveforms that are quite different compared to the first one. And here I just put on the left is for the note 0 and on the right for the note 2, to show you that even though it's not exactly the same, we kind of see the same behavior. So once again, the output in blue has a bigger envelope. Also, you have some interferences that make you have parts where the reference audio is actually bigger than the convolved one. And this is what we were interested in, is to see what we can have as strange behavior, more or less. And another particularity of this one is that you have kind of a metallic robotic noise on the background that we think is due to the noise of our audio, because when we are using audio with more noise, this metallic sound increase. And this can make you think a bit of the first comp filter if you use them. So we can hear it. So it's the same reference audio.
We are testing the artificial reverb.
And then for the first model.
We are testing the artificial reverb.
And the last one.
We are testing the artificial reverb. We are testing the artificial reverb.
And the second one is quite similar to the third one. But you can see and you can hear that the third one was almost like an echo compared to the first one that sounded more like if you were in a small room. And so the next step for this work would be to maybe work on quantum cavity scale, so using nanometer scale and also using the velocity of a light wave. Also, we would like obviously to work with more complex 2D and 3D geometries because it would add some complexity to the noise, maybe some reflection that are different. Another thing is to use directional sources. So as I showed you, it was omnidirectional for the ray tracing, and for the feedback network, it was going straight and I didn't add anything. But you can add that and it would change how the wave are reverberated. And this goes with the more accurate dipolar profiles. It was very simplified, these power laws, but we could use something that is actually closer to the real dipolar profiles, and that includes this directionality, because actually most of the time dipoles also depend on the angle. And finally, a nice thing to have would be a real-time convolution. So instead of having because I'm working on Python, so I put my input and then I get my output. So the nice thing would be to have this reverb working real-time for a live concert or anything like that. And this is it for the artificial reverb part and what I've done during the year. And I'm gonna make you listen to the piece I created using this reverb. So just some keys to understand it better, maybe. It's composed kind of like a sound work, but I'm using a lot of different recordings or sounds from the sonification I've made also at ICFO. So it looks more like a dream because it's not especially sound that you can always hear in the real world, I would say. And also you have a flute that comes as an idFX and that is changed based on a lot of effects. And so obviously it's inspired by musique concrète because of all this mixture of recordings, and in the end it's a melting pot of a lot of things I've done during the year and places I visited, work I've conducted at ICFO. So it's a summary of 2024 and 2025. And the quantum-inspired reverb is also used in that. And that's it. Maybe if you have some questions before, I can answer them. That's it. Is there some question before we listen to the piece? If not.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Can you tell us which types of reverb you used in your piece?
So mainly I used the one with the feedback delay network that had the metallic sound, and it was applied to the orchestra plus the flute. And I also applied the other one with the ray tracing to the different transformation of the flute, and also to another part. Maybe the percussion at the drums at some point, yeah. And I use different configuration of room. Mainly, I changed the size of the room to have several different effects.
Hi, thank you for the presentation of the reverb. I noticed that in one of the examples there was a very high pitch that came out. Is it possible to control this? Or do you see the reverb more as a way of simulating spaces that maybe don't exist, or as a way of transforming the sound as if it was a convolution? So as more as a generator, or as a way of reproducing things?
So the idea is to create some reverberation that would be done by some rooms that don't exist, as you said. So the point is more to transform the sound and get some specific textures, so more for artistic purposes, because this kind of quantum features on these specific models wouldn't really be possible to make experimentally. So it's a theoretical model and project, but yes, the main point is to create some texture that would be that we don't hear somewhere else. So yeah, that's it. Well, if there's no more question, maybe we can switch to the next speaker. Thank you.
Bona tarda a tothom i gràcies per venir a xerrada. Us vull parlar de SoundPod, que és una instal·lació interactiva que convida a fusionar sons. Primer us faré una petita demostració. Activo el micro. Un moment tècnic. Vale. Doncs com anava dient, aquí a la dreta tenim la biblioteca on tenim els sons que creem, i a sota de la biblioteca tenim un botó per gravar sons i un altre botó per aconseguir sons de free sound. Aquí al centre tenim el cresol, que és la part on els sons es reprodueixen seguint a interactuar amb aquesta pluja d'una manera estocàstica, i també és el lloc on diversos sons es poden combinar. Llavors, primer us voldria parlar de com va anar el procés de desenvolupar-lo. Tot això parteix d'una assignatura que he estat cursant al màster que estic fent a Austria Linz, Postdigital Luthery, i l'assignatura es diu Sound and Music Computing. Allà l'assignatura va començar a principis d'octubre i llavors a mitjans de desembre ens van dir de fer un projecte final. Va ser llavors quan vaig tenir l'idea de fer alguna cosa combinant sons. L'idea era explorar un espai latent, després parlaré de què és això, i explorar-lo de manera que podia agafar dos punts, dos sons allà i obtindre el so del mig. Llavors el que volia era combinar dos sons i aconseguir un de nou. A les vacances d'hivern vaig estar pensant-hi i va ser a mitjans de gener quan el meu profe d'aquesta assignatura, Moisés Horta, em va compartir un codi perquè vaig estar intentant fer-ho i la veritat que no me'n vaig en sortir, però em va compartir un codi que feia precisament això. Llavors em vaig posar com a propòsit presentar en un esdeveniment del màster 10 dies després i van ser uns 10 dies una mica estressants, però vaig poder presentar una primera versió alfa d'això del SoundPod i després amb el feedback que vaig obtenir vaig poder passar a febrer optimitzant el codi, fent-lo més maco i implementant algunes coses que m'havien suggerit. I ara som al juliol i estic presentant-ho aquí al TECSMUC. Llavors, hi ha diverses coses que es pot parlar en l'àmbit conceptual. La primera potser és l'objecte sonors. No sé si ho he dit abans, però es dic als sons de SoundPods objectes sonors i no ho són ben bé, segons ho va definir Sheffer, però a SoundPods són unitats sonores bàsiques que generen una estructura musical al sonar amb la pluja i també al ser combinats amb altres sons. Són, per tant, objectes sonors segons la definició de Curtis Rhodes, que va donar el 2001 al seu llibre Microsound, on deia que són sons amb una durada d'entre una fracció de segon i varis segons. Pierre Schaeffer, que va ser qui va encunyar aquesta paraula el 1966 al seu llibre Tractat dels objectes musicals, va dir que aquests objectes eren com un gest, com una respiració. I aquest material sonor en contextes de música electrònica se li diu sample, però com que som qui som, en diem objecte sonor. Llavors, els sons estan representats com tokens, una paraula que al català es podria traduir com a fitxa. Hi ha molta cosa feta amb aquest tipus de representació. Us volia donar simplement dos exemples. Això és un vídeo que es diu AV Clash. I hi ha quatre sons. Quatre rodones que interactuen entre si. Aquestes quatre rodones són representacions de sons. Una altra famosa implementació d'aquest concepte és el React Table, on els tokens ja no són objectes en la pantalla digital, sinó que són fitxes tangibles que es poden manipular. També té part de música generativa en tant a aquesta pluja simulada que fa que aquella àrea de centre, que li dic resolve, sigui com una petita partitura gràfica. En quant a això, em vaig inspirar amb un aplicatiu que he passat hores buscant i la veritat que no l'he acabat trobant, i si algú de vosaltres per algun motiu el coneix, agrairia molt que em digués. Aquest aplicatiu, el que jo recordo, era una manera de generar música en diversos agents. Cada agent era un petit cercle que s'anava movent seguint algunes regles a la pantalla I llavors hi havia un d'ells que llançava una mena de radar, i aquest radar era un cercle que s'expandia, i quan aquest cercle interaccionava, tocava, col·lisionava amb els altres cercles, cada cercle feia un so. Llavors, seguint aquesta idea, he fet a la pluja que quan toca els cercles sonen. M'agradaria molt poder referenciar-la, però no puc. Una altra inspiració forta ha sigut el joc que es diu Alchemy, perquè els sons de Soundpod es poden combinar entre si per crear-ne nous, al igual que en aquest joc. Alchemy és un videojoc de puzzle que es va crear al 1997 i el game loop, l'acció principal, és combinar dos objectes diferents per crear-ne un de nou. Comences amb 4 elements bàsics, aigua, aire, foc i terra, i llavors arrossegues una sobre de l'altra per crear diferents. Per exemple, aquí aigua més terra és igual a fang, després fang més ter més foc és igual a totxo. Aquesta en concret és literalment la versió que jugava jo, que és un cló d'una mica més tard, però ha hagut altres persones que han portat aquest concepte més enlloc, en concret demanant-se i si les combinacions en aquest cas són 580, però i si fossin infinites. Llavors, buscant resposta a això, una de les versions que es va crear el 2024 es diu Infinite Craft, i llavors aquí quan dos elements es combinen i no hi havia cap combinació existent, el sistema demana una IA generativa que faci una predicció de quin hauria de ser el resultat. Llavors, si aquest resultat es deixa i quan el mateix jugador o qualsevol altre fa aquesta combinació, doncs aquest resultat sortirà. Llavors, això mateix és el que he fet jo per combinar els sons. He deixat que una IA, en aquest cas una mica diferent, calculi el resultat. Però una altra opció és deixar que el resultat el decideixi la intel·ligència humana. Què és el que passa a Elemental 3, que és un joc d'una mica abans? O sigui, aquest Infinite Craft era del 2024, l'Elemental 3 és del 2018, i aquí quan una persona combina dos elements per primer cop, té l'opció de decidir, de suggerir quin hauria de ser el resultat. Després aquest resultat es posa a vot i si aconsegueix suficients vots es deixa com resultat definitiu de combinació. És una idea que trobo que també podria ser una exploració interessant per a un projecte col·laboratiu de crear o categoritzar samples. Si algú d'aquí està interessant en fer una cosa així, parlem-ne després. A part de fusionar sons per crear nous, Soundpod ofereix dues maneres d'introduir material nou al sistema: agafar samples externs i gravar sons originals. Aquest primer mètode recupera sounds des de FreeSound, i dic recupera perquè el model d'IA de Soundpod es va entrenar amb aquests mateixos sons. Llavors, això estableix una relació on el mateix ecosistema que dona el material cru també informa el procés generatiu que el remodela. El segon mètode, la gravació directa, convida l'usuari a incorporar la seva veu al sistema, que és un element sonor molt personal, fortament lligat a la seva identitat i a la seva presència en el moment. Un cop processada per la xarxa, es dissol i s'integra al sistema. I si bé això no forma part del concepte principal de Soundpod, ens pot fer pensar en la facilitat en la que donem les nostres dades personals a la Big Tech, treballant sense retribució. Ara m'agradaria parlar de com funciona i en concret, Soundpod és una aplicació que es pot dividir en dues parts: l'interfície, el que diem frontend, i el processador, el processament, el que diem backend. L'interfície, que és el que veiem i amb el que interactuem, és una pàgina web. Està escrita amb tecnologies web HTML, CSS i JavaScript. També fa servir una llibreria que es diu React, que fa més fàcil fer aquest tipus d'aplicacions interactives, i la vaig fer servir per primer cop quan vaig participar en un projecte que es diu Groove, i és un programari lliure un programari lliure i col·laboratiu d'aprenentatge musical. És una mica com un Google Docs per fer música urbana, i vam veure que funcionava molt bé. Llavors vaig poder aplicar algunes coses que vaig aprendre amb aquesta feina per fer la interfície de SoundPod. La tecnologia que SoundPod fa servir per processar els sons es diu autocodificador. I un autocodificador és una xarxa neuronal que representa patrons en un espai latent i pot codificar i descodificar dades. Això ho he estat intentant trillar per intentar explicar-vos el més simple possible, però després si n'hi ha dubtes, no dubteu en demanar-ho. Llavors, xarxa neuronal. Una xarxa neuronal és un sistema estadístic que extreu patrons d'un conjunt de molts exemples. L'espai latent és una representació comprimida dels exemples amb el que s'ha entrenat una xarxa neuronal. Cada exemple correspon a un punt en aquest espai i els punts que més a prop estan corresponen als exemples que més s'hi semblaven. Per exemple, posem que un autocodificador s'ha entrenat amb un conjunt de sons que són diferents en altura i en dinàmica. Llavors, l'espai latent podria ser un pla bidimensional on l'eix X fos la dinàmica i l'eix Y l'altura. I llavors cada so estaria representat com un punt en aquest pla. Abans dèiem que l'autocodificador pot codificar i descodificar dades. Codificar vol dir que li podem donar qualsevol so, encara que sigui un so amb el que no s'ha entrenat, i llavors ens donarà unes coordenades, una posició per a aquest so. Descodificar vol dir, això és la clau que ens permet sintetitzar sons nous. Vol dir que posem que tenim aquest pla amb els pitjos i amb les dinàmiques i podem escollir qualsevol punt allà, i llavors al descodificar-lo aconseguirem un nou sample. I això, les coordenades poden ser qualsevols, i és per això que amb la descodificació podem crear un son nou. I llavors podem fer servir això de codificar i descodificar per aconseguir posicions intermitges. Primer li donem dos sons aleatoris, dos sons que nosaltres decidim, arbitraris, i llavors els codifica en l'espai latent. Llavors aconseguim dues posicions. Després fem una línia entre aquestes dues posicions, aconseguim un punt intermig, i això és el punt que després descodifiquem. Llavors hem aconseguit sintetitzar un nou son que és una mena de barreja entre aquests primers dos sons. Ara, aquesta no és l'única manera de barrejar sons. De fet, tenim l'Spectral Modeling Synthesis, que es va desenvolupar per Xavier Serra i el Music Technology Group a la Pompeu Fabra. I ara escoltarem unes comparatives. Els exemples d'aquestes comparatives estan agafades directament de la tesi de Xavier Serra. I, sentim-les. Aquests són els sons font, diguem.
We were away a while ago.
Hem sentit una veu i un gat. L'autoencoder, o sigui, l'intel·ligència artificial ho fa així.
We were away a while ago.
L'Spectral Modeling Synthesis ho fa així.
We were away a while ago.
Sentim una vaca. Com ho fa l'autoencoder?
We were away a while ago.
Com el fa el SMS?
We were away a while ago.
Sentim un gong. Com el mescla amb la veu.
We were away a while ago.
L'autoencoder
We were away a while ago.
I el SMS.
We were away a while ago.
Trobo que l'autoencoder ho fa d'una manera una mica més bruta i crua i l'SMS és una cosa més neta i clara. I, bueno, depèn de per quina estètica fer servir l'SMS podria ser inclús podria donar un millor resultat. Llavors, per què ho he fet amb intel·ligència artificial? En part perquè és el que està de moda i és el que ara em permet parlar-vos d'això de l'espai latent i després d'alguna problemàtica, però la veritat que després parlaré sobre el treball futur. Jo crec que una de les direccions dels camins més interessants pot ser precisament pensar en com es poden combinar els sons. Llavors, algunes implicacions ètiques. L'autoencoder que he fet servir en aquest projecte és part de Stable Audio Open, que és un model d'intel·ligència artificial generativa desenvolupat per una empresa que es diu Stability AI. Aquest tema d'intel·ligència artificial generativa és un tema complex que comporta moltes problemàtiques i com que avui m'agradaria parlar de centralització de dades i el poder. Si voleu saber més, hi ha una infografia, un article interessant que es diu Cartography of Generative AI, fet pel col·lectiu barceloní Talleres Tampa. I llavors parlaré de la centralització de les dades i del poder. I és que els models d'intel·ligència artificial generativa necessiten moltes dades, una quantitat ingent. I aquests exemples es fan servir per autoconfigurar-se i aprendre. La majoria dels que coneixem, com ara el ChatGPT, extreuen dades d'internet, codi i llibres robats pels quals no tenen llicència. I en això Stable Audio Open sí que és diferent, perquè tots els exemples estaven disponibles sota les llicències Creative Commons, la majoria sent de Free Sound. Tot i així, encara que el model es digui Stable Audio Open, no és tan obert. La llicència, només es pot fer servir gratis amb fins no comercials, en primer lloc, i en segon, l'empresa té el poder per treure aquesta llicència en qualsevol moment. En tot cas, la tendència és clara. Hi ha grans poders tecnològics que s'ho poden permetre i extreure informació que està a l'abast de tothom en un internet més o menys distribuït. I la centralitzen, la moldean d'acord als seus interessos i extreuen beneficis. I al fer servir aquestes eines, les mainstream almenys d'intel·ligència artificial generativa entrem al seu lloc. Llavors hi volem ser còmplices. Com venia dient abans, la part de SoundPod que crec que està menys treballada i més potencial té per investigar nous camins és la fusió de sons. Com us he explicat, faig servir un autoencoder, un autocodificador desenvolupat per Stability AI, però m'agradaria trobar altres opcions d'hidratació de sons com pot ser l'espectral modeling, síntesis. Una altra línia que em sembla interessant i també us he dit abans és el format en què els mateixos músics poden decidir el resultat de la combinació i el graven o produeixen i el pugen perquè altres músics o altra gent pugui votar. Per altra banda, la interfície de SoundPod està projectada en una pantalla i les entitats que manipulem són completament digitals. Un dels pilars de la meva recerca actual és la representació tangible del so i aquesta seria una bona oportunitat per idear interaccions en aquest nivell. Per exemple, el React Table que us he ensenyat abans fa servir fitxes. Una idea seria fer servir unes fitxes i maneres més tangibles fes tenir eines especialitzades, eines físiques que permetessin combinar aquestes fitxes. Resumint, en la presentació d'avui us he parlat de SoundPod, una instal·lació interactiva que convida a manipular i combinar sons. He explicat el context conceptual que inclueix els conceptes d'objecte sonor, la representació de sons com a tokens, la música generativa, el videojoc Alchemy i la relació entre el material i la seva transformació. També he fet una introducció al que és un autocodificador, que és l'eina que faig servir per combinar sons. He parlat sobre altres opcions per la hibridació de sons, com l'ESMS, i sobre algunes implicacions ètiques. Per últim, he esmentat algunes direccions futures que podria prendre per a aquest projecte. Llavors, moltes gràcies per escoltar-me. Ara respondré encantat a preguntes, si en teniu, i després podreu venir aquí i provar la instal·lació vosaltres mateixos. Preguntes? Bé, doncs res, si voleu venir a provar-lo. Els sons s'agafen des de la biblioteca, sonen aquí. Aquest so és per agafar, aquest botó és per agafar un so des de Freesound i aquest és per gravar amb aquest micro. Hola, hola. Bueno, té alguns filtres. Agafo sons entre 1 i 10 segons per mantenir-me en aquesta idea d'objectes sonors i filtro els sons explícits perquè no siguin i siguin.
Hola. Sí, si combines un so amb ell mateix, es degradarà una mica perquè sempre es traduirà a la representació del model d'intel·ligència artificial. Per exemple, amb l'exemple que he posat abans d'aquest grid de sons que eren iguals però que eren diferents amb pitch i amb dinàmica, el que faria era intentar acostar-se al màxim. Si la diferència era en pitch i en dinàmica, fer potser un so que té aquest pitch i aquesta dinàmica, però el timbre seria completament el de l'altre. El model de SoundPod no té dues dimensions, sinó que en té 64, però el mateix i aquests eixos no són uns eixos tan clars, però sí que s'efectuaria aquesta mena de reducció en qualitat. No, si combines ara mateix com està, quan combines dos sons, la llargada del so, perquè quan es combinen dos sons no es combinen els sons com a tals, sinó que es combinen quasi per sample per sample. Llavors han de tenir una llargada igual. El que faig és que quan dos sons tenen una llargada diferent, s'escolleix una llargada aleatòria entre mitja i llavors un d'ells s'estira, l'altre es comprimeix i surt el resultat. El que sí que ara mateix el punt d'interpolació és just 0,5, o sigui que són el mateix. Però sí que dos sons poden donar un resultat diferent perquè aquesta llargada es selecciona aleatòriament.
Cada vez que encuentras Cada vez que encuentras una de estas interpolaciones en el espacio latente y la guardas, ¿solamente se guarda como digamos, la posición entre todas estas dimensiones, o también guardas el archivo de audio y a la siguiente vez que usas el programa tienes como una especie de librería de tus archivos que creaste?
Sí, és guardat tot. És guardat en l'arxiu d'àudio com els seus pares. Llavors es podria fer un gràfic d'on ha sortit exactament un so i es podria fer com el seu arbre genealògic. També és una possibilitat d'una representació diferent. També això fa pensar en altres maneres d'estructurar la música, que també pot ser interessant. I sí, és des de tot això ara mateix. També és interessant guardar-lo perquè els sons són de freesound, llavors molts necessiten atribució. Llavors, a l'acabar una sessió hi ha aquesta opció de descarregar l'atribució de tots els sons que s'han agafat de freesound. Per exemple, els sons ara mateix que s'han fet servir són aquests. Llavors, és el que s'ha de fer. És la manera que hi ha per poder utilitzar-los de la llicència.
Ara pensava també, quan has dit de l'arbre genealògic, o sigui, amb genètica hi ha uns gens més potents que uns altres. No sé si se t'ha passat això pel cap que en un sample, no sé com seria, però que algun aspecte d'aquell sample sigui més fort en el sample fill, diguéssim.
El que aquesta eina permet és fer... estem parlant de samples, però també estem parlant... sample té aquests dos significats, no? El de més semblant a objecte sonor, aquesta part d'àudio que és d'una duració intel·ligible, i després aquesta micromostra. Llavors, el que es pot definir és quant pes té un àudio. Això es pot definir al llarg de tot l'àudio, o també es pot definir tot l'àudio, tot l'objecte sonor, tot el sample, o també es podria fer una curva de començo sempre amb aquest so totalment i després faig un crossfading a l'altre so, o podria ser un altre tipus de corba. Llavors, això seria, un so per si tindria més importància que l'altre. Es podria fer altres coses com ara aconseguir els tags dels sons, llavors donar més pes a alguns tags que a alguns altres. També ara mateix faig servir la part del model que només és autoencoder, això que fa de traduir sons en punts, però també aquest Stable Audio Open té una part que és paraules a so. Llavors també es podria pensar en com no agafar el son, sinó agafar les paraules, els tags que fan un so, i això transformar-lo en un so. Llavors aquí també es podria jugar amb aquests gens més forts que altres.
I el latent space el pots pesar d'alguna manera? O sigui, pots donar que algunes de les dimensions tinguin més pes que altres a l'hora de trobar les distàncies, o sigui que d'alguna manera la distància cap a una dimensió l'exageris com per seleccionar trets específics de...
Sí, això es pot fer, canviar l'escala del latent space. És una cosa que no he investigat i ara mateix no sabria com fer-ho exactament. També això són trets que normalment no corresponen ben bé amb el que nosaltres identificaríem amb un tret. Però sí, és una direcció amb la que podria seguir investigant. També per aprofitar més les parts més fortes d'aquest procediment que faig servir, que és l'autoencoder en lloc de l'Spectral Music SMS, Spectral Modeling Synthesis.
Este modelo que estás usando de Stability AI da opciones también para reentrenar o hacer una especie de fine-tuning de ciertas partes con tu propio audio, o lo usas tal cual como viene en la librería.
Sí, l'he estat fent servir tal qual i de fet no m'he posat a fer fine-tuning perquè no disposava els meus experiments ara mateix entre AI i els directament han sigut una mica fallits i no sé si aquesta llibreria en concret ho permet, però fer fine-tuning i buscar uns sons en una direcció compositiva concreta també és una possibilitat. Doncs bueno, moltes gràcies.